All right, so let's see what we got here with this forum. We did it for deacon deaconess issue. We'll do it here, and whenever there's a interpretive issue, we might do something like this again. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a healthy thing to be honest and open about the difficulties of Scripture, and to just be open and honest about how we wrestle through the text and why we land where we land. And I'm under no illusion that I have always got everything sorted or I'm absolutely right, but I certainly seek to try to be as faithful as I can and be as convinced as I can from the Scripture. I just want to start by saying, before we go through the different views, I just want to make it clear that what we're talking about here is a tertiary matter. Remember we talked about the primary, secondary, tertiary? Primary has to do with doctrines that are essential to the gospel, what you must believe to be saved. All right? So that's not what we're talking about this morning. The secondary doctrines are doctrines that affect Christian practice. Things like, do you baptize babies or not? Things like that. This is not a secondary matter that we're about to talk about. Tertiary has to do largely with Christian living, personal Christian living. And so this does impact personal Christian living, but probably not as great as you might think. How greatly does it impact Christian living? Well, all the views that we're going to look at all focus on some kind of hope that's intended to motivate God's people to be faithful in the present. So in that sense, there really is essentially no practical difference in the different views. And we can be really grateful for that. So really the only way and the only areas where this really impacts is how you interpret the Bible. Okay, so principles of interpretation. That's really the main difference, because how we approach this text will impact how we approach other texts of a prophetic nature, and may also spill into other passages that might affect even secondary or primary doctrines. So it is important in that respect, but let's keep it all in perspective. That's my point. And also, I guess the other area it might impact you is your Christmas carol verses that you sing. And I'll explain that in a moment. So our approach in this forum is basically we're going to look at, as far as I could find in all the commentaries I had access to, there are basically 6 major views. And what we're going to do is go through each one at a time. And I'll just briefly, in a very summary fashion, explain to you what that view is, why I don't find it personally convincing. And then we'll open it up for questions. And then we'll be done, all right? So let's begin with the first view. The first view is that it refers to the intertestamental period. The intertestamental period is that period between the closing of the Old Testament canon and the beginning and the opening of the New Testament prophetic witness of John the Baptist. So that's several hundred years, and there's prophetic silence in that time, and there's a lot of history. If you want to know about that history, there's a lot you can read about it. Josephus, and the apocryphal books of the Catholic, like 1st and 2nd Maccabees and other things like that, tell you about the historical period. Now, what is this view? In this view, they take the shaking as Haggai, and I'm just going to assume that you got it fresh in your mind. The shaking there, they take as referring to warfare, the warfare and revolutions that took place in the counter-revolutions of the intertestamental period. And there were many, and there were a lot, and you can read about that in 1st and 2nd Maccabees. They would take the wealth of the nations filling the house with glory to refer to the Persian government's funding of the temple rebuild, or referring to the Seleucid Empire when it controlled Jerusalem, and you can see that in 2nd Maccabees chapter 3, or it refers to Herod the Great's later expansions. That's that view of the intertestamental period. Now, the problem with this view that I see is that the heavens and the earth, how were the heavens and the earth shaken? They weren't. And plus, it says all the nations will be shaken, and he will do it once more. Well, in the intertestamental period, there were several nations, a good number of nations, but not all the nations. And it wasn't in a once more fashion. And I think to seal the deal, the writer of Hebrews, as read in Hebrews 12, verses 26 to 28, the writer of Hebrews saw it as still yet future. He spoke of it of a future time where this once more shaking will occur. And so he didn't see it as fulfilled in the intertestamental period. So that, to me, I think seals the deal. The second view is that it refers to the first coming of Christ. And we're going through these views chronologically, okay? Not in any kind of preference or anything like that, just chronologically. So this view is a very popular view. It's a long-standing view. It reaches all the way back to the 4th century A.D. with Jerome and others. It's represented in a number of major English translations, like the New King James, NIV, and it's certainly reflected elsewhere in some of our Christmas hymns. What is this view? This is the shaking they take as referring to the earthquake that accompanied Christ's death or resurrection, or they would say the moving of heaven by the testimony of angels at the birth of Christ, or making the star appear at the birth of Christ. They would take that as somehow shaking the heavens. Or it refers to Christ's earthly ministry. They would say that when he shook the kingdom of darkness and exercised power over the laws of nature. So that would be the first coming view. They would see the wealth of the desire of all nations, referring to Christ himself, that Christ is the desire of all the nations, and his arrival to and entering into the temple was the fulfillment. And they would see the silver and gold, and some would see it as referring to the gold, the frankincense, the myrrh that was brought to Christ at his birth. They would see the peace that is promised in Jerusalem as coming as a result of Christ's coming. And as I mentioned, this is reflected in some Christmas carols. You heard of "Come Thou Long-Expected Jesus"? Maybe not, I don't know. It's the line goes, "Dear desire of every nation," referring to Jesus. O come, Emmanuel. O come, desire of nations. So that's the view it takes there. And angels from the realm of glory, right? Seek the great desire of nations. So it's a very long-standing view. Why? I mean, and look, you can understand why it could be popular, because, I mean, who doesn't like to talk about Christ? Who doesn't like to see fulfillment in Christ, right? But there are a number of issues, I think, with this view. First of all, before Christ came in his first coming, in what way was he expected by all the nations? So they would say, well, he may not have been consciously expected, but he was subconsciously expected. Really? That's pushing it, I think. At no point during Christ's first coming, even at his death and resurrection, you will not find a passage that says that the heavens were shaken. Heavens were shaken. You just won't see that term. You won't see that terminology. You don't see all the nations being shaken. You don't see that terminology. The heavens were darkened, yes. They were obscured. The temple, the veil in the temple was torn from top to bottom, but you will not find shaking language. Now, the earth did shake, yeah. But did it shake all the nations? As far as we could tell, it was a local earthquake. What about that phrase, the desirable nations? And I mentioned that the Hebrew syntax speaks against it. I don't know if you want me to go into it or not. I'm happy to do so, but I'll give you a little bit more information, and you can ask in the Q&A if you want. The issue has to do with the relationship of a subject to a verb. Now, if I've already lost you, then I don't know what else to do. Like if I say, I love my wife, which I do, I is the subject, love is the verb, right? In English, our verb needs to match the subject. If it's plural, we say he, we don't say he loved the wife, he loved his wife. No, he loves his wife. We have to change the wording of the verb to fit the subject. Well, it's very similar in Hebrew and Greek, except that in Hebrew and Greek, and particularly Hebrew here, you can actually have, in some cases, a plural conceptual noun, even though it's singular, with a singular verb or a plural verb. So, what we have here in Hebrew is the verb is plural, they will bring, but the subject is singular, desire or desirable, something like that. The thing is that word desirable can also refer to desirable things as a collective noun, and that's the way it's being used. If it's referring to a person, then the verb would need to be singular. It is not, it's plural. So that's why pretty much any major, significant, modern commentator sees right through that ancient view or that historical view from the Hebrew syntax. Also, that word in the Hebrew, wealth, is most often used for inanimate objects 15 out of 16 times. The one time it's used for a person, it is in the singular with a singular verb. So that's why, again, the cross-reference to 1 Samuel 9:20 doesn't work. All right. And then also, verse 8, the silver is mine, the gold is mine, makes it very clear that the desirable things is referring to precious metals. And verse 9, that the glory being spoke of is the glory of this house. So also combined with that is the fact that no gospel writer, no New Testament writer applies this prophecy to Christ's first coming. So all that is why I would not find it convincing. The third view is the church. This refers to the church. So the shaking of the sea and the dry land is taken to refer to the spread of the gospel to the nations, in the islands, and the continents, or it's taken as the supernatural impulse by which God draws sinners to salvation. By the way, that was John Calvin. Don't know if that's interest to anyone. That's his view of this passage. The desired of all nations is taken to be the elect people of God, true Christians, if you will, or the spiritual blessings in Christ. And this house referred to here is taken to refer to the church, which is made up of living stones, like 1 Peter 2 says. Now, the reason I feel like this view isn't convincing is because in what way does the spread of the gospel shake the sea and the dry land? In fact, you won't even see shaking language or terminology or even synonymous to that term referring to conversions or anything like that. Plus, when you look at Haggai's context, in what way would some ambiguous future conversions of whatever encourage them to rebuild the temple? And neither the gospel nor the church is associated with silver and gold. So basically, silver and gold becomes meaningless. That's how I would see it. View number 4 is the eternal state. So some would see this as referring to the new heavens and the new earth. They would take shaking there as referring to the destruction of heaven and earth, as 2 Peter 3 indicates or describes the destruction of the heavens and the earth. They would take the temple filled with glory as the new Jerusalem, and the wealth of the nations being the kings in the earth, bringing their glory into it, as it says in Revelation 21. The problem with this view is that there's a marked difference between Haggai's shaking and Peter's destroying by intense heat. See, in 2 Peter 3, it talks about the heavens and the earth being destroyed by an intense heat. There's no shaking language in 2 Peter 3. Also, the New Jerusalem, as I mentioned in the sermon, it says there's no temple in it. So how can it refer to that? I don't find that very convincing. And then view number 5 really is just a mixture. You'll find, and this is very, very, very common in the commentaries, is they'll pick and choose from the different views and sort of float in and out. And some would say that it's intentionally intended to be multiple fulfillments. So the same words can refer to this and that and this and that and this, and then they would just go with whatever the commentator wants to choose. The problem with that is God says once more. Once more. And that's the best rendition of the words, not multiple times. So it's referring to one referent. So there are the different views. Now, let me just, of course, the last view is the view that I took and that I gave to you in the sermon. I don't need to go through that again, but permit me just to end with this thought, and then we'll open up to Q&A. You know, you'll notice that as I work through the text, that I took the words in a natural, plain, literal sense. I didn't allegorize the text. I didn't spiritualize the text. I didn't read symbols into the text that were not there. If we think about it, if everything before this passage and after this passage is taken literally, what in verses 6 to 9 indicate we should take verses 6 to 9 differently? That's my question. That's my contention. There's nothing in those words that would indicate that he's speaking symbolically. So why should we take them symbolically? And when it comes to predictive prophecy, a literal approach is confirmed by the many predictions of the Old Testament and New, but particularly the Old, that have been fulfilled already. If we want to know how to interpret predictive prophecy, all we got to do is look at those prophecies, predictions that were already fulfilled. And they were all fulfilled literally. We can look at Ezekiel 26 about the destruction of Tyre. Amazing accuracy, even stretching to Alexander the Great and what they did to bridge from the land version of Tyre to the island Tyre. And Nahum's prediction of the destruction of Nineveh, also amazing detail, all fulfilled literally. We could talk about the many prophecies in the first half of Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, many times over, just anticipating the destruction of the northern kingdom by Assyria. We could talk about even also in Isaiah and in Habakkuk about the Babylonian destruction of the southern kingdom of Judah with amazing detail, all fulfilled literally. We could talk about the 70 years of captivity that was fulfilled literally by Jeremiah 29:10. We could talk about Cyrus, even hundreds of years before, or 150 or so years before a Cyrus could ever exist, before a Medo-Persian empire could even be imagined. Isaiah predicts and names Cyrus as the very pagan ruler that God would use to bring a remnant of Israel back to their land in Isaiah 44 and 45. And of course, we could talk about the many predictions of Christ's first coming that were all fulfilled literally. So I believe it's when a literal interpretation is departed from that all manner of speculative views will emerge. And to case in point, that and close, let me give you this. I don't know if you've heard of Rabbi Akiva. He was a leading Jewish scholar of the late first century. He employed a similar allegorical interpretation or principle of interpretation of this very text in Haggai, very similar to the other views. But you know what he did? He said it was fulfilled and applied it to Simon Bar Kokhba, who led the Bar Kokhba revolt against Rome in 132 AD. Because that's what you can do. The moment you depart from a literal interpretation, you can allegorize the text and pretty much make it apply to just about anything. Now, that would be my opinion, but I'm open to questions, and I'll do my best to try to answer.